I've lived long enough to know when a storm is about to roll in. Sometimes the clouds are in the sky, and sometimes they sit right at your dinner table, pretending to pass the salt. That evening, as I stepped into my son Daniel's house, I could feel the air buzzing with something sharp and invisible. The kind of tension you don't see, but your bones know to brace for. I had brought a simple gift for my grandkids, little toy cars and a book about dinosaurs. They barreled toward me as they always did, squealing, "Grandpa, Grandpa," with that bright sincerity only children can give. Those moments are the reason I keep showing up, even when the adults make the house feel like a battlefield. Melissa stood in the kitchen, stirring a pot with the stiff posture of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. She lifted her eyes just long enough to say, "Hi," but the words slid out like a cold pebble. No warmth. Not even the polite smile she used to offer back when she still cared what I thought of her. "Evening, Melissa," I replied gently. I've learned not to force friendliness on those determined to withhold it. Dinner started peaceful enough. Daniel asked about my morning walk, the kids told me about a project at school. But Melissa kept glancing at her wrist, over and over. Each time she looked, her mouth tightened. It reminded me of someone rehearsing for a moment they knew was coming. When she finally spoke, the shift was subtle at first. "Has anyone seen my bracelet?" she asked, but her eyes didn't sweep the table. They swept me. I recognized the bracelet. Thin gold chain, delicate with a little emerald clasp. Her grandmother's. She told us the story a dozen times, how she inherited it the same week she got engaged to Daniel. She treated it like a symbol of her lineage, whatever that meant to her. Daniel frowned. "Did you leave it in the bathroom? The bedroom?" "No," she snapped. "I always keep it on the entry table before cooking." She stood abruptly and walked toward the front hallway. I kept eating, though I could feel her nerves crackling in the air like static. A few seconds later, her voice cut through the house. "It's gone." The kids stopped chewing. Daniel stood up quickly and jogged to her. "What do you mean, gone?" he asked. "Gone," she repeated, louder, as though shouting made the word more true. I rose from my chair, slowly, the way older men do, not out of weakness, but out of respect for the gravity of moments. When I reached the hallway, Melissa was tearing through the little bowl where she kept her keys, shaking coats on the rack, dropping shoe soles onto the floor. And then she stopped. Her eyes shifted to me, just long enough for me to feel the weight of something heavy and ugly brewing behind them. "Maybe," she said slowly. "It was picked up," she asked. Daniel blinked. "Picked up? By who?" Her pause told me everything. "By your father," she said. The world thinned into a quiet, sharp ring, a soundless ache inside my chest. I can take insults, I can take being ignored, but a thief? That's a brand that sticks, even when it's a lie. I swallowed. "Melissa, why would I take your bracelet?" My voice was calm, steady, years of practice, really. People my age don't get loud, they get precise. "I don't know," she said with a tight shrug. "People forget things. Maybe you thought it was yours. Older folks sometimes pick things up without realizing." Older folks, there it was, the well-worn excuse for cruelty. Daniel stepped between us. "Melissa, Dad wouldn't," but she cut him off. "Well, it's missing, and he's the only one who walked near the table." I looked at Daniel, really looked. His eyes were conflicted in a way that hurt more than her accusation. He didn't believe I stole it, but he didn't fully dismiss the possibility either. Doubt is a wedge, and once it's hammered in, even the smallest crack grows. "I didn't take your bracelet," I said plainly. She scoffed. "Could you check your coat, just to be sure?" The children were watching, all wide eyes and trembling forks. That was the part that stung. Accusing me privately is one thing. Doing it in front of the little ones carved into me like a dull blade. Still, I reached into my coat pockets. I knew nothing was there, but I also knew refusing would make me appear defensive. I turned them inside out. Empty. Melissa crossed her arms, unsatisfied. "Maybe it slipped under something," she muttered, but her tone said she didn't believe that at all. She never intended for it to be found. Not now, not here. The storm had arrived. Dinner ended in thin, fragile silence. I kissed my grandkids goodbye and put on my coat. Daniel followed me to the door. "Dad, she's just stressed. It's her grandmother's bracelet. She's emotional." I nodded. I understand. But I didn't. Not fully. Not yet. All I understood was that something had shifted in this house. Some quiet, poisonous hostility had taken root. As I stepped outside, the evening air felt colder than it should. Melissa stood behind Daniel, arms still crossed, watching me with an expression that wasn't anger, but something more dangerous, certainty. She had already decided who I was. I walked down the driveway, each step echoing with a humiliation I hadn't felt in years. And yet, beneath the sting, something else stirred, a memory. Months ago, installing small security cameras in the entryway for Daniel after those break-ins. He thanked me. Melissa barely noticed. But I remembered, and they had forgotten. As I reached my car, I paused, gripping the door handle. For the first time that night, I allowed myself a small, quiet breath that wasn't quite a laugh, but close. If only, I murmured to myself, she remembered the camera I installed. The storm wasn't going to consume me. No, the storm was going to reveal her. The morning after the accusation, I woke up earlier than usual. Not because of age, as my daughter-in-law liked to imply, but because my mind was still replaying the previous night. Accusings have a way of echoing long after the words are spoken, especially when they come from someone who smiles at you in photographs but sharpens her tongue when no one else is listening. My hands went through the familiar motions of making coffee, grinding the beans, listening to the soft hum of the machine, waiting for that first curl of steam to rise. I've always liked slow mornings. They're kinder to an old man's heart. But that morning there was no peace to be found in the ritual. I kept seeing Melissa's face, the way she twisted concern into suspicion, how easily she tossed the word accidentally toward me, like a stone thrown into still water, waiting to see how far the ripple spread. And the look in Daniel's eyes, that left its own bruise. While I sipped my coffee, my phone buzzed on the table. Daniel. A part of me hoped the first words out of his mouth would be, "Dad, I'm sorry. Melissa found the bracelet wedged under a drawer." Something simple, something that could patch this up without a scar. But when I answered, his voice was thin, stretched tight. "Hey, Dad, good morning." "Morning, son." There was a pause. I could hear him breathing. I'd known him since the day he fit in one hand. I knew when he was choosing his next words carefully. "Dad, look, I know it's uncomfortable, but could you check your coat pockets again? Maybe your car, your house, just to be sure." Not anger, not accusation. Worse, doubt. A quiet ache opened in my chest. "Daniel, I checked everything. I didn't take anything." "I know, Dad, I know. It's just, Melissa barely slept last night. She keeps crying about her grandmother, and she's convinced the bracelet might have slipped into something of yours." "She seemed pretty convinced it slipped into me," I said, my voice even. He sighed softly, and I could imagine him rubbing the bridge of his nose the way he does when he's overwhelmed. "Dad, she's under a lot of emotional pressure. You know how symbolic that bracelet is." So her feelings weighed more than my integrity. "I'll check again," I said quietly, "for your sake." But we both knew I wouldn't find anything. I hung up and set the phone down, but it buzzed again almost immediately, this time with a message, several actually, from my sister, from a cousin, even from one of Daniel's old friends who barely talked to me anymore. All some variation of, "Is everything okay? We heard something happened. Tell us you didn't steal anything." Word travels fast in families, faster still when someone dramatic stokes the fire. I ignored the texts. If there was one thing age teaches you, it's that you don't respond to a fire with a bucket. You wait until the wind changes direction. But then, as I stared at the screen, a photo popped into the family group chat. A photo Melissa posted. A close-up of her wrist. Bare. Caption, "Some things can't be replaced, especially when they're taken from you." And beneath that, dozens of little sad face emojis from extended family members. The insinuation hung in the air like a spider's thread, thin, delicate, but strong enough to trap whoever brushed against it. My blood ran cold, but not with fear. No, something older, heavier. The feeling of watching your honor be chipped away in public. A man's name is the only possession he knows he'll carry to his grave. When someone tries to stain it, you feel it in your bones. I set my phone down and walked to the window. Outside, the morning sunlight hit the yard just right, turning the dew into flecks of silver. Calm, serene, a stark contrast to the noise brewing in my family. I remembered something Melissa said to Daniel a few months back when she thought I wasn't listening. Your father says he wants to help, but he just complicates things. It's age. They lose track. They repeat themselves. They misplace everything. She was planting seeds even then, preparing a story she could use when she needed it. And now here we were. As noon approached, I drove into town to clear my head, picked up a few groceries, stopped by the post office, chatted with a neighbor. Normalcy tasted bitter, but I forced myself to swallow it. But when I returned home, an unfamiliar car was parked in my driveway. Daniel stepped out first, shoulders stiff, eyes shadowed with guilt. Melissa followed, wearing a half-hearted expression of concern, though her lips were pressed too tightly for it to be genuine. My stomach sank. They weren't here to talk. They were here to search. Daniel began, "We just want to look around, for peace of mind." Peace of mind. Such a polite little phrase for such an indecent action. Melissa pushed past him, already scanning the living room like a detective on a case. She opened drawers, lifted pillows, checked under the coffee table. My home, my sanctuary, was being treated like a crime scene. I stood silently, watching the spectacle unfold. The humiliating part wasn't that they were searching. The humiliating part was that Daniel let her, that he believed her fear outweighed my dignity. At one point, she turned to me and said, "Sometimes older people misplace things and don't realize it." The words dripped like syrup over a rot. I didn't respond. Silence can be a weapon, too. After 20 minutes, their scavenger hunt yielded nothing but dust and resentment. Melissa made a sharp exhale. "Well, it's not here." I folded my hands behind my back. "No, it isn't." She shot me a look that said she still didn't believe me. Or maybe she already knew the truth and needed me to play along with her performance. They left with Daniel apologizing in that soft, exhausted tone of a man caught between loyalty and logic. When their car disappeared down the street, I finally exhaled. It wasn't anger that filled me. Not yet. It was something colder, older, something that settles deep and waits for its time. And beneath that layer of ice, another thought lingered like a whisper. She thinks the bracelet is gone. She thinks the lie has taken root. But she had forgotten one very important thing. Every moment she spent in that entryway, the camera saw everything. They might doubt my memory, they might doubt my innocence, but they should have never doubted the quiet old man who notices every detail and remembers exactly where he placed his cameras. There's an ache that comes with age, not in the joints or the back, though those have their own complaints, but in the heart. It's the ache of watching the people you raised, the people you poured your time and youth into, forget who you truly are. They don't remember the man who held them when they cried, or the one who fixed their bikes, or the one who stayed up late helping with school projects. No, they remember only the version of you that suits their narrative today. And Melissa, she was crafting a narrative. After Daniel and Melissa left my house that day, the silence that followed became a kind of companion, a heavy, gray stillness. I didn't turn on the TV, didn't read, didn't even eat. I just sat in my old armchair, listening to the soft tick of the clock on the wall. Each sound a reminder that I was alone with a truth no one else cared to consider. But sitting in silence also brings clarity and memory. I leaned my head back and let the past play itself out. In the beginning, she was all sweetness and soft laughter. She'd call me Dad before even the wedding ring circled her finger. She'd ask for my recipes, pretend to enjoy helping Daniel in the yard, compliment the grandkids' drawings with exaggerated enthusiasm. At first, I thought she was trying too hard, but then I noticed she never asked Daniel about his earlier years, his favorite childhood meals, the way he used to collect rocks, the time he broke his arm playing baseball. She only cared about the stories that made her look attentive. And whenever she complimented me in public, she'd quietly jab at me in private. Maybe you shouldn't lift that, it's too heavy for someone your age. Do you need help remembering your medication? You're repeating yourself again. Little comments, small cuts, thin enough to ignore, but sharp enough to sting. I brushed them off then. Daniel seemed happy. Why cause waves? But the shift happened a year after the wedding. One afternoon, I overheard her speaking to a friend in the kitchen while I fixed a loose cabinet hinge. Daniel's father means well, but he's old-fashioned and forgetful. Nice man, just slow. Slow. I let the words settle, as if trying to understand who she was talking about. Certainly not the man who spent 35 years managing a construction company. Certainly not the man who handled blueprint math in his head faster than the new computer program Daniel swore made everything easier. But people hear things often enough, and eventually they start believing them, especially if the speaker delivers the poison sweetly. The bracelet she accused me of stealing wasn't just any bracelet. She told everyone how her grandmother had worn it on her wedding day, and how passing it to Melissa meant passing on the family legacy. I remember thinking it was beautiful, not because of the stones, but because of the emotion behind it. Melissa had cried when she first showed it to us. I believed those tears then. But there was something else about that bracelet. A memory stirred. A moment from last Thanksgiving, when she lost her temper because she couldn't find it for 10 minutes. How she blamed Daniel for misplacing it, even though she had left it on her nightstand. The woman had a habit of losing things, but never a habit of blaming herself. These little things matter to me, she snapped that day. I can't relax with someone who doesn't take them seriously. Daniel apologized, over and over, for something he didn't even do. That was the first time I noticed her power over him wasn't built on love, but on asterisk control. She wasn't cruel to them, no, not outwardly. But she controlled their time with me, decided when they could see me, how long, and where. Sometimes she'd cancel plans last minute, saying the kids were too tired or had homework or needed to rest, even when I knew none of that was true. She once said, "I don't want them learning old-fashioned habits." Old-fashioned. There it was again, another dismissive knife. It was around then that I started noticing Daniel calling less, visiting less. The distance wasn't sudden. It stretched slowly, like the widening crack in an old foundation. Melissa was quietly, methodically isolating the family. Sitting in my armchair, I replayed how she looked at me as she accused me, not with fear, not with sadness, but with something rehearsed, something she had prepared long before that evening. Her story had a script, and I was the villain. She needed the family to doubt me. Why? I didn't know yet, but lies that bold aren't born overnight. They're built brick by brick. My phone buzzed again that afternoon. This time, a message from Daniel. "Dad, Melissa wants to file a police report if the bracelet isn't found soon." Police report. I stared at those words, feeling the air leave my lungs. She wanted to take this public. She wanted the stain on my reputation to become permanent. I typed a reply and erased it, typed again, deleted again. Eventually, I set the phone aside. There was no point explaining innocence to someone who had already accepted guilt. Instead, I got up and walked to my computer. A quiet house, an aging man, the soft click of a keyboard. I opened the security camera portal. The cameras I installed after the neighborhood had a string of break-ins. Cameras I showed Daniel how to access. Cameras Melissa had waved off with the words, "as long as it doesn't ruin the entryway aesthetic." I clicked on the footage from the evening of the accusation. The screen flickered, then settled.
There she was, Melissa, walking into the entryway, alone, calm, not frantic, not searching. She set her purse down, glanced over her shoulder, then reached into her pocket. My heart beat steady and slow as I watched her slip something shiny into her own purse. Then she turned dramatically on her heel and stormed back into the dining room, beginning her performance. But the footage continued. After dinner, after the accusation, after I left, Melissa returned to the purse, pulled the same shiny object out, looked at it, smiled, then slipped it into her coat. I leaned back, breath drifting out of me in a long, quiet stream. It wasn't shock I felt, it was confirmation. She hadn't framed me because she lost the bracelet. She'd framed me because she needed me out of the way. And for the first time since the storm began, calm settled inside me. She had forgotten the camera I installed, but I had not. And now I knew exactly how and when I'd reveal the truth. I didn't sleep that night, not out of unrest, but out of a clarity so sharp it kept my mind awake. As the hours passed, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the dim reflection of the overhead light in my mug. The house around me was still, quiet, respectful in a way human beings often aren't. I had the proof. The camera footage was irrefutable. There was no misunderstanding to cling to, no angle Melissa could twist to paint herself innocent. She had planted the bracelet. She had performed her little tragedy of loss. And she had delivered the accusation with such smooth confidence that even Daniel, my son, my own flesh, had questioned me. But I also knew something else. Truth revealed too early loses its teeth. Sometimes you must let a lie grow roots so deep, the person who planted it can't escape the consequences when you pull it out. And so I waited. By the next morning, it was clear Melissa wasn't letting the dust settle. She pressed harder. I knew this because when I opened my door to fetch the newspaper, I found Daniel standing there, his eyes tired, his jaw clenched in a way that reminded me of his teenage years, the years when he never knew how to stand up for himself.
"Dad," he began, letting out a shaky exhale, "we need to talk." I stepped aside and motioned for him to enter. He did, but hesitantly, like a man crossing into a place he used to call home, but now carried fear in his pockets. He sat, rubbing his hands together. "Melissa, she's convinced the bracelet didn't just disappear." "She made that clear," I said quietly. He flinched at the tone. Good. Maybe guilt was finally tapping on his conscience. "You know she wants to call the police," he added. "She said she's giving it one more day before filing a report." I walked past him to the sink, rinsed my mug, and placed it upside down to dry. Simple motions, controlled. I didn't want him to hear anger in my breathing. "Daniel," I said, "tell me honestly, do you believe I took it?" His silence answered for him. It wasn't a long silence, it wasn't dramatic or heavy, just honest. The kind that wounds because of its simplicity. "I don't want to believe it," he whispered. I turned, leaning against the counter. "That's not what I asked." He looked up, his eyes glassy. "Dad, she wouldn't lie about something like this. She wouldn't." Ah, there it was again. Trust placed in the wrong hands. Misguided loyalty masquerading as love. "Your wife," I said steadily, "is more than capable of lying." He shook his head immediately, defensive. "No, you just don't understand her." "I understand manipulation better than you realize," I replied. "Your mother had a sister like that, sweet on the surface, venom underneath. People didn't believe the truth about her until it was too late." Daniel swallowed hard. "So you're saying, Melissa, what, framed you? Why would she do that?" "Why, indeed?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know, but because I didn't have enough puzzle pieces yet. There was something Melissa wanted, some reason she needed to discredit me so thoroughly. Stealing a bracelet was a petty act. Accusing me was not. That was calculated.
But telling Daniel that now would achieve nothing. He wasn't ready to see her clearly, and pushing too soon would only make him cling to her harder. Finally, he stood. "I'm sorry, Dad," he murmured. "I don't want things to be like this." I watched him walk toward the door, shoulders slumped. A man carrying a burden he didn't even understand. Just before he stepped outside, he paused. "If you did find it, will you just return it before she takes this any further?" There was no accusation in his voice now, only pleading. He wanted things to go back to normal. I wanted that too. But normality had been fractured long before last night. After he left, the day passed quietly enough. I decided to keep busy, cleaned the shed, organized drawers, watered the garden, all while thinking, reflecting, turning over the events in my mind. By evening, I had reached a decision. If Melissa wanted to drag my name through the dirt, then I would let her, right up until the moment she buried herself in her own lie. Around sunset, my phone buzzed again. A message from a niece. "Uncle, is everything okay? We heard something about a bracelet." Another message from a cousin. "Please tell me this is a misunderstanding." A third message, a fourth. The family grapevine was now a wildfire.
Melissa was behind it. She was spreading rumors quickly, preemptively shaping the story so that when this inevitably became a bigger issue, she would already be the victim. Clever, dangerous, predictable. Around 8 p.m., I received a message from my granddaughter, a simple voice note, her little voice cracking softly. "Grandpa, Mommy said you took something, but I know you wouldn't. I know you're not bad." I sat very still as those words played again and again. That was the moment something inside me hardened. It wasn't about dignity anymore. It wasn't about family reputation. It was about ensuring that child, my granddaughter, never doubted the truth again. I wouldn't let Melissa rewrite me into a villain in the minds of the innocent. No, if she wanted a performance, I would give her one. If she wanted an audience, I would gather it. But the final act would not belong to her. It would belong to me. This time, it wasn't Daniel alone. It was Melissa. She stood there in a crisp blouse, makeup done, posture stiff and righteous like a prosecutor ready to make her case. "We need to talk," she said. Ah, the storm had returned. "Come in," I replied, stepping aside. She entered my living room like she was entering a suspect's interrogation chamber, her eyes scanning the shelves, the furniture, the floor. And then she said the sentence that marked the lowest point in our family's history. "I want to look through your bedroom." Not a request, not a question, a command. There was only one word sharp enough for that moment. No. She stiffened. Daniel, who'd been lingering behind her, looked mortified. "But if you have nothing to hide," she began. "I said no," I repeated, calm but firm. "You searched my home yesterday. You humiliated me in my own living room. You will not step into my private room like I'm a criminal." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Then we'll have to file the report tonight." She thought she had cornered me. She thought the threat would break me. But I simply nodded and said, "Do what you think is right." The surprise flickered in her eyes like a candle in the wind. She wasn't expecting that. She didn't know that while she sharpened her blade, I had already fashioned the shield and the sword. As they left, Melissa wearing victory on her face, Daniel wearing shame, I found myself standing in the doorway long after their car disappeared down the street. I closed the door softly. No anger, no panic, just a stillness settling around me. Because now, after her intrusion attempt, after threatening police involvement, after poisoning the family's opinion, I knew exactly how far she'd fallen into her own scheme. And I also knew something she didn't. A lie that big can only collapse in public, which meant the reveal, when it came, would not be quiet. It would break the room in half.
and she had no idea the camera had caught every second of her performance. For the rest of that evening, I didn't do much of anything. I didn't turn on the TV or distract myself with chores. I simply sat in the armchair near the window, hands folded in my lap, letting the quiet hum of the night settle around me. I've always believed silence reveals truths that noise tries to bury. And in that stillness, I realized something unsettling. Melissa wasn't just angry.
She wasn't emotional or overwhelmed. She wasn't even humiliated. She was confident. A person who fears being wrong claws for control. A person who knows they built the narrative walks with certainty. Her attempt to search my bedroom hadn't been a desperate act. It was a performance, a calculated escalation designed to make me look defensive, guilty, unpredictable. The kind of behavior a person displays right before a police report becomes necessary. A thief doesn't usually protest, they panic. A liar, though, a liar prepares the stage, and Melissa had been preparing for a long time. Around midnight, I found myself staring at a little ceramic bowl on the shelf near the fireplace, a white dish with a faded blue rim. It wasn't special, just something my late wife used to keep her car keys in. Melissa once picked it up and laughed. Vintage, she called it, which was her way of saying ugly. But I remembered the conversation that followed. She told Daniel, "Why does your father always keep these old, pointless things? Don't you think he's getting stuck? Like mentally stuck? It's not healthy." There it was again, the soft introduction of the idea she loved planting into conversations, that I was slipping, slow, forgetful, no longer reliable. That memory lingered in my mind like smoke. By dawn, I heard the soft ping of new messages, my phone lighting up on the nightstand. More family members, more whispers, more passive-aggressive concern. One message from Daniel's cousin read, "Uncle, maybe you should talk to Melissa. She's really upset. If you accidentally grabbed it, it's nothing to be ashamed of." Accidentally grabbed it? Accidentally pocketed it? Accidentally stole it? The narrative had fully germinated. By mid-morning, even my neighbor stopped by with an awkward smile. "Everything okay?" he asked, scratching the back of his neck. "Your son's wife seemed, well, she hinted something was wrong." Hinted. Melissa never accused people outright in public. She preferred softly folded lies, the kind that slipped into people's ears unnoticed. That was her skill. Her venom wasn't loud, it was elegant. I reassured my neighbor and went back inside, closing the door with a heaviness I couldn't hide. Some men drink to cope, others call friends. But me? I prefer truth. I sat at my desk and reopened the camera footage. I watched Melissa's movements again, slower this time. Her behavior was ritualistic, almost rehearsed. First, she walked to the entry table, checked around lazily, pretended to search under a magazine. She wasn't actually looking for the bracelet she claimed was there. She was just making sure her discovery would appear believable. Then she reached into her jacket pocket, a glint of gold, a subtle motion of her hand slipping into her purse. She looked around, just once, but not toward the ceiling where the small camera watched her. Then she marched back into the dining room, letting her voice crack as she announced, "It's gone." In that moment, she became the victim, and I, the villain she'd crafted. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly through my nose. There was pain, yes, but also clarity. She wasn't careless, she wasn't impulsive, she was deliberate. Melissa was either hiding something she didn't want the family to discover, or she wanted me out of the picture for reasons I hadn't uncovered yet. Either way, truth was a tide. It always erodes the sandcastles built by lies. Around lunch, my phone rang again. This time, it was my sister, Margaret. She never got involved in drama. She avoided conflict like it was a contagious disease. "Is it true?" she asked immediately. "Is what true?" I replied. "That Melissa thinks you took something." I chuckled softly, but there was no humor in it. "She thinks many things." Margaret exhaled, the sound crackling with frustration. "I hate that she's doing this. She's always been self-centered. Daniel is blinded by her." "So it seems," I murmured. Then she said something unexpected. "She called me last night."
I straightened. What did she say? She cried, sobbing like the world was ending. She told me she felt unsafe around you now. Unsafe, she said, as if you're dangerous. Dangerous. I closed my eyes briefly. She wasn't just painting me as forgetful anymore. She was painting me as unstable. Why did she call you? I asked. She said she needed support. She said you'd been acting strange lately, and she didn't know what you were capable of. I let out a slow, controlled breath. She's preparing the report. Yes. Margaret's voice trembled. She's preparing everyone. After I hung up, the room felt colder. Melissa wasn't building a story for attention. She was building a case. I thought back to the early days of their relationship. Daniel had always been gentle, a man who didn't like conflict. Melissa found that quality and twisted it into a leash. She controlled little things first. What Daniel wore, who he spent time with, how much you worked, the decor of the house, the kids' schedules. Soon, he asked permission just to go fishing with me, a simple tradition we'd shared since he was 12. And now, he was standing in my living room apologizing for his wife searching my house like a police raid. A part of me wondered when he had stopped being my son and started being her husband first. Melissa always idolized her grandmother. The bracelet was her last symbol of prestige, her proof that she came from class. She often remarked that it was the only item of true value she possessed. But she also feared losing it, losing anything really. Everything in her life was about control, because underneath all her polished confidence lay a terrified woman who believed every slip in her image was a personal failure. Women like that don't lose heirlooms. They weaponize them. By late afternoon, the realization settled in. She didn't frame me because she suspected me. She framed me because she needed me weakened. Why? I didn't have the full answer yet, but I knew one thing. This wasn't about the bracelet. This was about removing me as an influence in the family. And perhaps about influencing Daniel's financial decisions, or establishing herself as the sole emotional authority in the house, or isolating the children from me permanently. None of those possibilities were far-fetched. But whatever her reasons were, they no longer mattered, because now I had something tangible, evidence, and Melissa had no idea she had already lost. Just before sunset, I opened my door to grab a package from the porch. And there, tucked under it, was a handwritten note from Melissa, short, sharp, cold. Please stay away from the children until this is resolved. No greeting, no explanation, just the sentence of exile. That was the final insult. Taking my dignity was one thing, spreading lies was another. But keeping me from the children, the only pure thing in this mess, was the line she should never have crossed. As I held that note, the sky above me dimming into dusk, I felt something inside me shift from cold stillness into controlled, quiet purpose. She wanted me out, then I would make sure she understood exactly who she was trying to push out of this family. A man she underestimated, a man who observed everything, a man who carried truth like a blade in his pocket. And soon she would know the camera she forgot existed was about to ruin her performance. The next morning came with a kind of eerie calm, not the peaceful kind you feel when life is gentle, but the heavy calm that settles right before something breaks, the kind you feel in your ribs more than your ears. A quiet house, a quiet mind, a quiet storm building inside me one thought at a time. I sat at the dining table, sipping coffee and staring at the note Melissa left me, her neat handwriting cutting into the paper as sharply as her intentions cut into my family. Please stay away from the children until this is resolved. Resolved. As if she held the authority to decide when I could see my own grandchildren. As if I were some neighborhood menace rather than the man who had rocked them to sleep, taught them how to tie their shoes, and cheered for them at every school event she didn't feel like attending. Every time I reread that note, something inside my chest tightened. Not anger, something steadier and colder. a resolve sharpening itself grain by grain into something unbreakable. I placed the note gently on the table and stood up. Today would not be a day of grief or self-pity. Today would be a day of clarity. I walked toward my desk, opened the drawer, and pulled out a notebook, a habit I kept from my working years. When life became complicated, I wrote things down. It forced the truth out of the shadows. I wrote 3 simple questions. 1. Why would Melissa want to frame me? 2. Why escalate it to a police report? 3. Why isolate me from the children? I stared at the questions for a long time. Disrespect I could understand. Manipulation I could understand. But framing a man, her husband's father, for theft? That required motive, strong motive. She wasn't afraid of me, not truly. If she were, she wouldn't have strutted into my house to search it like she owned the place. No, she was afraid of something else, something she didn't want me near, something the children might mention, something Daniel might discover, something the family must not know. Melissa was building a fortress around her lies, brick by brick, and she needed to remove anyone who could blow the walls down. Maybe she feared my judgment. Maybe she feared what I had already noticed. Or maybe she feared what I might notice if I kept coming around. The more I thought about it, the clearer the picture became. This wasn't about a bracelet. This wasn't even about me. This was about control. She didn't want a father-in-law. She wanted silence, compliance, no witnesses to the cracks in her perfect facade. I thought of my son, my sweet, gentle, eager-to-please boy. The boy who once stood up for bullied kids on the playground now flinched whenever Melissa raised her voice. When they first married, he used to call me for advice, ask me how to handle arguments, finances, parenting. But over time, the calls grew shorter, less frequent. Eventually, he only phoned when Melissa wasn't home. That was another clue I should have paid more attention to. The isolation wasn't new. It began long before the bracelet. Around noon, there was a knock, a sharp then patient one. I opened the door, expecting a neighbor. Instead, it was Daniel. He didn't look angry. He looked defeated, exhausted, like a man carrying someone else's burdens. "Dad," he exhaled, "can we talk?" I stepped aside. He entered, running a hand through his hair. "Melissa called the police this morning." My stomach tightened. "Did she file a report?" "No," he said quickly, "not yet. They told her she needs more substantial evidence, but she's adamant. She's preparing a formal statement." Of course she was. "What kind of evidence does she think she has?" I asked. Daniel hesitated. She told them you've been acting confused lately, misplacing things, forgetting conversations, getting angry over small things." I stared at him, silent. Those weren't descriptions. They were setups, lies she had been feeding him for months. He continued. She said she's worried your memory issues are getting worse and that maybe you took it without realizing." Memory issues. A convenient explanation for her storyline. A convenient way to poison Daniel's trust in me. A convenient way to have me deemed unreliable without ever raising her voice. But this next part was the dagger. She told them, "You might be unsafe around the kids." I turned, facing the window. Sunlight fell across the floor in thin, broken lines. I could feel the weight of each one pressing on me. Unsafe. I spoke calmly, but my voice felt like glass. "Do you believe that?" "No," Daniel said immediately, stepping closer. "Dad, no, I swear I don't. I don't know what to do. She's convinced of her story. She cries all night. She says she can't live in a house where she doesn't feel safe." "Safe from what, Daniel?" I asked softly. "The father who raised you? Who helped build your house? Who saved every penny to give you a better future?" He closed his eyes. I know. But she's scared. And when she gets scared, she spirals." "She's not scared," I corrected. "She's controlling you." He said nothing. Silence is sometimes the truest confession. "I didn't take that bracelet," I said gently. "I know," he whispered. but it sounded less like conviction and more like hope. He left shortly after, carrying guilt like a weight on his back, and I watched him go, wondering how long he'd been drowning without me seeing it. That afternoon, I sat at my desk again and brought up the camera footage, not to confirm her guilt, I'd already done that, but to study her timing, her movements, her intentions. And that's when I noticed something I had missed before.
A tiny detail, a quick glance. When Melissa slipped the bracelet into her purse, she didn't just look around out of caution. She looked toward the staircase, toward the children's rooms, not for witnesses, for clearance. I replayed it again and again. Then it hit me. Melissa didn't panic she lost the bracelet. She panicked the children might have seen her put it somewhere earlier. Kids notice things adults overlook. Kids repeat things without filtering them. Was that what she was afraid of? Were the children the real threat to her story? The realization crawled up my spine. Around 5 o'clock, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Daniel, not Melissa, not a nosy relative. It was the principal of my grandchildren's school. "Mr. Hartman?" she asked, her voice gentle. "Your granddaughter had a difficult day. She was crying and asked to call you. We couldn't reach your son or daughter-in-law." Crying, asking for me, always me. "I'll come right away," I said. "No," she replied. "She's calmer now. She said something we thought you should know." My grip tightened. What did she say? She said her mommy told her not to trust you anymore, that you take things, and she looked very confused and upset. She kept repeating, "Grandpa wouldn't do that. Grandpa tells the truth." A coldness spread through my body, heavy and slow. Melissa wasn't just shaping a lie for adults, she was planting it in the mind of a child, poisoning innocence, poisoning love, poisoning the one bond she had no right to touch. I thanked the principal and hung up. Then I walked to my desk again, opened the camera folder, and this time I didn't watch Melissa. I watched the hallway just before she reached the entry table. A small movement caught my eye. My granddaughter peeking from behind the wall, watching Melissa, seeing more than Melissa realized. It wasn't only the camera that caught the truth. The child had seen something too. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. Why Melissa escalated so quickly. Why she wanted me away from the children. Why she rushed to control the narrative. Why she needed me to look confused, unstable. She wasn't just hiding her deception. She was afraid the children would expose it. Now I understood exactly what Melissa feared. And now I understood exactly how to end this. Not with anger, not with noise, but with truth sharpened into the cleanest blade. And soon, very soon, the entire family would see what Melissa had done. Because it wasn't just the camera she forgot. It was the child who saw everything. I've faced many storms in my lifetime, financial ones, emotional ones, even the kind that tear roof off houses and snap old trees like twigs. But nothing compares to the quiet violence of watching someone poison your family from the inside. That evening, after the call from the school principal, I sat in my study with the lights off. The only illumination came from the soft glow of the computer screen as I replayed the footage again and again. Not of Melissa slipping the bracelet into her purse, but of my granddaughter. The little girl stood at the corner of the hallway, half hidden behind the wall. Small hands clasped in front of her, wide, unblinking eyes watching her mother. She didn't look confused, not startled, not frightened. She looked observant, like me. It didn't surprise me. Children often inherit traits their parents overlook. Daniel inherited my gentleness. My granddaughter, apparently, inherited my habit of standing silently in doorways, watching everything people think they hide. But what struck me wasn't that she saw Melissa plant something in her purse, it was what she did afterward. She didn't run, she didn't cry, she didn't speak. She simply turned and walked upstairs, quiet as a shadow. A child who sees a lie often doesn't know what to do with it. They carry it like a heavy stone until it drops out unexpectedly. And Melissa knew it. That's why she needed me away from the children.
Not because I was unsafe, because they were on the verge of speaking the truth. At dawn, I found a new voicemail on my phone. A tiny voice, soft and trembling. "Grandpa, Mommy said you can't come over because you took something. But I think Mommy hid it. I don't want to say wrong things. I miss you," she whispered the last part. "I miss you." Her confusion broke something in me. A man can tolerate accusations, he can endure rumors, but watching a child walk through the fog created by adults, watching innocence twist into uncertainty, that is the kind of pain that burrows deep. I played the message 3 more times, not because I didn't understand it, but because it fueled the resolve I needed for what came next. I spent the next 2 hours pacing the living room, thinking through the timeline. Melissa's escalation wasn't spontaneous. She had been preparing this stage for months, calling me forgetful in front of relatives, hinting at memory issues, telling Daniel she worried about my declining awareness, telling neighbors I was struggling, restricting my access to the grandkids so gradually that no one noticed, and finally framing me publicly for theft. This wasn't desperation. It was a calculated erasure. The question remained, what did she want that required me removed? And then an idea came to me, a chilling possibility, but one that made everything click. Money. Not greed in the obvious sense, though Melissa was never shy about her desire for luxury, but control over the family finances, control over Daniel's decisions, control over inheritance conversations that she suspected would significantly involve me. Perhaps she feared I would interfere if she pressured Daniel into something risky. Perhaps she feared I would question changes she wanted to make in the household. Perhaps she feared the children revealing things about the home environment when I visited. Whatever her reasoning, only one conclusion remained. Melissa needed me gone. Not physically, not permanently, but discredited, silenced, diminished. She was rooting me out of the family tree, one branch at a time. I printed the camera footage onto a USB drive. Then I uploaded a backup onto an encrypted cloud folder. Then I created still frame images showing every incriminating moment. I didn't intend to expose her yet, not when she believed she held the upper hand, not when she still thought the family was in her pocket. No, a lie collapses best under its own weight. Let her dig the hole deeper. Let her drag more people into her story. Let her gather an audience. Then I would make sure she fell into the pit she carved. Around midday, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting visitors, but life has a way of sending you the people you need at the precise moment you need them. I opened the door to find Daniel's mother-in-law, Janice, Melissa's own mother, standing there. A stiff purse on her shoulder, lips pressed so tightly they were almost invisible. I hadn't seen her without Melissa nearby in months. "May I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside and watched her examine the house, not with suspicion, but with something else. Something like fear or shame. She sat down in the living room and smoothed her skirt. "I came because Melissa told me something, and I need to hear your side." "My side?" I echoed. "What did she tell you?" "That you stole her bracelet, and that you denied it, and that you were becoming unpredictable." Her eyes darted to mine. "I know my daughter. She can be dramatic, yes, she gets that from her father. But outright lying?" She shook her head. "That's not her. At least, I didn't think so." I studied her face. She didn't come here to defend Melissa. She came here because a sliver of doubt had cut through her maternal loyalty. "Tell me, Janice," I said softly, "did Melissa tell you she searched my house?" She froze. "Did she tell you she tried to search my bedroom without permission?" Janice's mouth opened slightly, shock rippling through her expression. She didn't mention that." "Did she tell you she's been telling the children not to trust me?" Color drained from her cheeks. She pressed a hand to her mouth. "No, she wouldn't. She wouldn't involve the children." "She already has," I said. Janice looked down at her lap. Her fingers trembled. I know she can be controlling, but this is too far. That was all I needed to hear. Would you like to see the truth? I asked quietly. Her head snapped up. I stood, walked to my desk, and retrieved a single printed still frame, the one showing Melissa slipping the bracelet into her purse. I handed it to her without a word. She stared at it for several seconds before whispering, "Oh my God." Then she whispered it again, softer. A mother realizing her daughter wasn't the victim she pretended to be. She did this?" Janice whispered. "She truly did this?" "Yes." Tears welled in her eyes. "What have I raised?" I placed a hand on her shoulder. "A person who thinks lies protect her better than truth ever could." She nodded slowly, absorbing the blow. After a long moment, she asked, "What are you going to do?" I looked her straight in the eye. "I'm going to tell the truth," I said, "but not yet. Melissa is preparing a storm. And the best time to reveal the truth," I paused, letting the weight of the moment settle, "is when everyone believes the lie." Janice inhaled sharply, understanding what was coming, understanding that Melissa would be exposed in front of the very people she tried to manipulate, understanding that this would break more than her facade, understanding that justice, when timed correctly, leaves an echo. After she left, I sat back in my armchair and breathed deeply. The stage was set. The actors were in place. Melissa had built her story into a towering structure, and I now held the wrecking ball. She thought the camera was her secret advantage, but the truth was simple. She forgot the camera. She forgot the child, and most of all, she forgot the man she was dealing with. An old man who remembers everything, a quiet man who sees everything, and soon the entire family would see everything too. The day of Daniel and Melissa's anniversary dinner arrived with a kind of heavy stillness that told me fate had chosen its hour. The world outside my window looked perfectly normal. Sunlight warming the rooftops, neighbors walking dogs, children biking down the sidewalk. But beneath that ordinary surface, something else pulsed. Tension, anticipation, the steady hum of truth preparing to break the surface. I woke early, not because I needed the extra time, but because old men like me tend to rise before the sun when something important lies ahead. I made my coffee slowly, carefully, letting each step ground me. Today wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about clearing my name. It was about stopping the poison Melissa had been pouring into my family. It was about reclaiming the dignity she stripped away from me, one quiet insult at a time. It was about protecting my grandchildren from a future shaped by lies. And it was about Daniel, my son, my only child. A man drowning in a marriage he didn't recognize was suffocating him. I packed a small envelope. Inside it were printed still frames of Melissa slipping the bracelet into her purse, a USB drive containing the full footage, and the bracelet itself nestled in a small gift bag. I closed the envelope gently, as though sealing a chapter of my life. The restaurant Melissa chose for their anniversary was one of those places that pretends to be casual but prides itself on charging triple for tap water. Elegant lighting, white tablecloths, servers who glide like dancers. I arrived 5 minutes early, not out of eagerness, but out of respect. My father always taught me the first person at a gathering should be the one with the most to lose. And today, ironically, that was me. But I felt no fear, only resolve. When I stepped inside, I saw them immediately. Daniel was in a pressed shirt he probably didn't choose himself. His shoulders tense, his smile forced. Melissa sat beside him, radiant in her confidence, her laughter loud and polished as she chatted with friends and distant relatives. She wore a new bracelet on her wrist, a silver one this time, flashy, a replacement for the one she lost. She glanced up when she noticed me, and her smile faltered for half a second, an expression so small most would miss it. But not me. Her eyes hardened, her spine straightened. She was bracing for a scene she assumed she would control. "Dad," Daniel said, rising to greet me. I'm glad you made it." His voice held relief and guilt and something else. Hope, maybe. Melissa, however, didn't stand. She kept her seat, resting one hand delicately on her new bracelet. "Hello," she said coolly. "I wasn't sure you'd come, given everything." Given everything. A subtle way of reminding everyone present that she was the victim. I simply nodded. "I wouldn't miss your anniversary." She didn't like that answer. I could see her lips tighten. Conversation flowed, people laughed, toasts were made. But beneath it all, I could feel the undercurrent tugging at us, Melissa's silent expectation that I would sit there, humbled, quiet, diminished. Every now and then, someone shot me a subtle glance, the kind that contained questions they were too polite to voice. I swallowed the bitterness. Let them look, let them wonder. Doubt spreads both ways. After the entree, the server brought out a small cake and set it at the center of the table. "Before dessert," I said, rising slowly, "I'd like to give you both a small anniversary gift." The table quieted, a few smiles. Melissa's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. "A gift," she repeated, sweetly. "You didn't have to do that." "Oh, I did," I replied. Her sweetness evaporated. Daniel looked confused and hopeful. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the small gift bag. Her eyes locked onto it. Suspicion flickered behind her lashes. "This is for you, Melissa," I said, offering the bag toward her. She accepted it hesitantly, fingertips trembling with the fear of being exposed and the pride of believing she had already won. She opened the bag, pulled out the bracelet. Her grandmother's bracelet, the bracelet she framed me for stealing. No one gasped, not yet, but I saw confusion sweep across several faces. Melissa stared at the bracelet like it had crawled out of the grave. "How?" she breathed. "How did you—" Before she could finish, I reached into my other pocket and pulled out the envelope. "And this," I said, "is for the entire family." The room held its breath. Melissa's face paled. She opened her mouth to speak, but the server, who had been instructed earlier, rolled in the presentation screen Daniel had used for their wedding photos. "Daniel," I said softly, "would you help me play something?" He frowned. "Dad, what is this?" "Just the truth," I replied. Melissa stood up quickly. "Daniel, sit down. We don't need to do this here." But Daniel, for the first time in a very long time, ignored her. He took the USB from my hand and inserted it into the screen's port. The footage began to play. There was Melissa, walking calmly into the entryway. There she was, opening her purse, slipping the bracelet inside. Her face unmistakable, her posture confident. A ripple of shock spread through the room. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Another voice murmured, "She planted it." Melissa's breathing turned shallow. This is edited," she cried out, voice cracking. "He manipulated it. He must have." This time, Melissa retrieving the bracelet after accusing me, tucking it into her coat before leaving the house. Daniel's face crumbled. His eyes darted to her. "Melissa, you told me Dad took it. You told everyone." I didn't. It's not." Her voice shook violently. "This is out of context." But it was not. It was the clearest context there could be. Her mother, Janice, covered her mouth with her hands, tears forming in the corners of her eyes. "Melissa, how could you?" Melissa spun toward me, wild. "You're trying to destroy my marriage. You're doing this because you hate me." "No," I said. "I'm doing this because you accused me of a crime. Because you lied to my family. Because you involved my grandchildren." Her legs weakened. She grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. The room had grown painfully silent. No sympathy remained. No allies. No audience believing her script. For the first time, Melissa stood in a spotlight she hadn't prepared for. Daniel turned to her, voice trembling with fury and heartbreak. "You lied. You lied to me. You lied about my father. You lied to our kids. How long has this been going on?" Melissa's face twisted into something desperate. She reached for him, but he stepped back. "Don't," he whispered. "Not this time." She crumbled into tears, collapsing into her chair. But no one rushed to comfort her, not even her friends, not even her mother. The truth had been revealed, and its echo filled the room. I remained standing, not triumphant, not smug, just steady, calm, resolute. Melissa had built her fortress of lies brick by brick. I simply opened the window and let the truth blow it down. And the best part? She still had no idea that this was only the beginning. The room didn't erupt into chaos the way one might expect. It didn't explode or fracture or turn into shouting matches. No, what happened was far more devastating. Silence. Thick, unforgiving silence. The kind that strips a person bare. Melissa sat in that silence, tears streaking down her cheeks, mascara smudging into dark rivers. Her hands trembled. Her breath came in jagged pulls. But no one reached for her. No one offered a tissue. No one said her name gently. Her audience, the same audience she'd carefully curated, now stared at her with cold disbelief. Daniel's face was the hardest to look at. Years of love, stress, sacrifice, and blind loyalty sat on his shoulders like a weight too heavy for one man. He stared at the screen, then at the bracelet in her hand, and finally at me. The truth had carved something out of him, left a hollow behind. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and trembling. "Why, Melissa?" She shook her head violently, stumbling over her own panic. I didn't mean. It was a mistake. I panicked. You framed my father," he said. "You framed him." Melissa reached toward him, but he stepped back again, this time harder. "Daniel, please," she begged. "You know how emotional I get. I wasn't thinking straight." "You were thinking clearly enough to blame him," he snapped. "To file a police report, to tell our children he couldn't be trusted." Her sobs grew louder, but the sympathy she expected wasn't coming. Not from her friends, not from her parents, not from anyone. I remained standing, hands clasped behind my back. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply watched the truth settle into each face around the table. It was Janice, her mother, who found her voice first. "Melissa," she whispered, "this is unforgivable." Melissa turned to her, desperate. "Mom, please." "You lied," Janice said, trembling. "Not just to us. You lied about a man who welcomed you into his family. You lied about something sacred. And you used your children as shields." Tears streamed down her face. This wasn't a woman defending a daughter. This was a mother realizing she didn't recognize the child she had raised. Melissa crumbled under her mother's disappointment more than anyone else's. Melissa hiccuped, "I thought if I didn't control things, I'd lose everything." Daniel stared at her in disbelief. "Control? That's what this was about? You framed my father so you could control the narrative?" And then, finally, the truth she had been hiding slipped out in broken words. "I needed him out of the way," she sobbed. "Your father, he sees everything. He questions everything. I couldn't handle it anymore." Daniel's eyes widened. "Handle what?" "He kept telling you to slow down," she cried, "to stop the renovations, to rethink the loan, to reconsider the investment. You always listened to him, not me." Investment, loan, renovation. The pieces slid neatly into place. Melissa didn't just want control in the emotional sense. She wanted control of the money, control of the decisions, control of Daniel's future. And my presence, my advice, my voice, those threatened her plans. She needed me discredited. She needed me gone. She needed Daniel to rely solely on her. "Dad warned me about the contractor," Daniel whispered, realization dawning. "And you yelled at me for listening to him. You told me he was trying to undermine you." Melissa collapsed into her chair, sobbing uncontrollably. I didn't want him interfering. I didn't want him stopping the life I'm trying to build. Daniel ran a hand over his face, trembling. By destroying my father? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The truth had etched itself into the silence. It wasn't anger that colored my words. It wasn't triumph. It was disappointment. Deep, quiet disappointment carved into each syllable. "Melissa," I said, "I never tried to control your life. I only tried to protect this family. If you had wanted help, you could have asked. If you had felt overwhelmed, you could have spoken. Instead, you chose lies. You chose destruction. And you chose to do it through the people who loved you." Her sobs quieted into hiccups. I continued. "You tried to take something from me that was never yours to control, my relationship with my son and grandchildren, and for that, I cannot offer forgiveness lightly." She looked down, collapsing inward. He stepped toward me then, not to apologize, not to beg, but simply to stand beside me. A small gesture, but a meaningful one. "Dad," he whispered, voice breaking, "I'm so sorry." I placed a hand on his shoulder. It was all the reassurance I could give at that moment. He would carry this lesson for the rest of his life. But Melissa wasn't done unraveling. She stood abruptly, chair screeching behind her, and screamed, "I did it for us!" The whole restaurant froze. "For us," she repeated, voice cracking. "I did it for this family." Daniel's face hardened. "No, you did it for control." Her knees buckled slightly, and she clutched the back of her chair. No one moved to steady her, not even her closest friends. The performance she had crafted so carefully was over. The audience had turned. And then, almost quietly, Daniel said the words that changed everything. "I want you to go home, Melissa. Alone." Her breath hitched. "Daniel, go home." The finality in his voice wasn't anger. It was heartbreak. She grabbed her purse, eyes wild with humiliation, and stepped away from the table. But before she left, she pointed at me with trembling fingers. "You ruined everything," she hissed. I met her gaze calmly. "No," I said, "you did." She stormed out of the restaurant, tears streaking down her cheeks. No one picked up their utensils. No one spoke for several moments. Finally, someone exhaled sharply, like a balloon losing air. Daniel sank into his chair, burying his face in his hands. His shoulders shook once, and then again. I sat beside him, silent, giving him the space he needed. One of Melissa's friends leaned toward her husband and whispered, "I can't believe she did that." Her mother was sobbing quietly into a napkin. The world Melissa built had shattered, and everyone was left staring at the ruins. This wasn't over, because the truth changes people, but it doesn't fix broken things on its own. Relationships crack, trust fractures, children cry, homes shake. Justice had only just begun its work, and the final consequences of Melissa's choices would not arrive until the dust truly settled. I stood up slowly, placed a hand on Daniel's back, and whispered, "Let's go home, son." He nodded, wiping his eyes. And together we walked out of the restaurant, not as a broken family, but as a family beginning to see clearly again. The drive home that night was silent. Not the peaceful kind of silence, the kind that wraps itself around two people like a blanket, but the wounded silence that forms after a storm, when destruction is still fresh and the mind hasn't caught up to the heart. Daniel sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window with unfocused eyes. Streetlights flashed across his face in intervals, revealing the exhaustion in his expression, the grief in the tight set of his jaw. He wasn't just processing what Melissa had done. He was mourning what he thought his marriage was. When we pulled into my driveway, he didn't move. For a long moment, he simply sat there, breathing slowly, trying to hold himself together. "Dad," he finally said, voice barely above a whisper, I don't know what to do. I don't know who she is anymore. I don't know who I've been living with." I turned off the engine and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You start," I said gently, "by breathing. Then you start by telling yourself the truth you've been avoiding for a long time. He swallowed hard. Which is? That you've been unhappy, not for days, but for years. And you thought enduring it made you strong. But enduring something harmful doesn't make you strong. It makes you disappear. His eyes brimmed, and one tear slipped down his cheek. I let her treat you that way, he whispered. I let her speak to you like you were nothing. I shook my head. No, son, she manipulated you. She isolated you. That's a kind of quiet abuse people don't recognize until they're far too deep. You weren't cruel. You were controlled. He wiped his eyes with the back of his sleeve. But I still let it happen. You did, I said honestly, but now you see it. And what matters most is what you do from here. We sat in silence for another moment before Daniel spoke again. Can I come inside for a bit? Of course, I said.
Inside, I brewed a pot of tea, the way his mother used to when he was a boy with nightmares. It was chamomile, her favorite, and the scent filled the room with something soft and familiar. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, elbows on the wood, head in his hands. "Do you think she ever loved me?" he asked, without lifting his head. I sighed. "I think she loved what you provided. Safety, stability, the illusion of control. But love without respect isn't love, son. It's ownership." He nodded, slowly. "Dad, will the kids hate her?" "No," I said. "They're too young to hate. But they will question, and you must answer them with honesty, gentle honesty. Don't paint their mother as a monster. Paint the truth as something they have a right to understand." He looked up at me. "And you? Will you forgive her?" I leaned back in my chair, watching steam rise from my mug. "Forgiveness is a long road," I said. "Tonight, I'm not there yet. She tried to destroy my integrity. She made our family doubt me. She weaponized the children. That kind of wound doesn't heal quickly." He nodded again. "But," I continued, "for your sake and the children's, I won't hold hatred for her. Hatred is a poison you drink hoping someone else gets sick. I won't live that way." Daniel looked relieved, in a tragic sort of way. He stayed until midnight before finally standing to leave. I think I'm going to stay at Mom's old house tonight," he said, referring to his late mother's family place, my place before I moved. "I need space, and I think I need to talk to a lawyer." "That's your choice," I said, "and whatever choice you make, I'll support you." As he left, I watched him walk to his car. His steps were slow but determined. He was beginning the painful process of reclaiming himself. And I felt something shift in me, too. A loosening of the weight I'd carried since the accusation. A softening of the anger. Not forgiveness, but the beginning of closure. The next few days were quiet. Melissa didn't contact me, not directly anyway. Instead, I received a series of frantic apologies through her mother, who visited twice more. "She's ashamed," Janice said. "She doesn't know how to face you." "Good," I replied the first time. I didn't sugarcoat it. Some shame is deserved. The second time, Janice asked timidly, "Will you let her make amends someday?" "I'll let her make honesty," I answered. "Whether she earns forgiveness is another matter." Word spread quickly through the extended family, and one by one, calls came in. "I'm sorry for doubting you. I should have known better. Melissa had us fooled. You didn't deserve that." I accepted each apology with quiet grace, though the sting remained. Trust, once cracked, never fits the same. But one call mattered more than all the others. My granddaughter. Her tiny voice whispered through the phone. "Grandpa, Mommy said she made a very big mistake. She cried. Daddy says you're not in trouble anymore." I closed my eyes. "No, sweetheart," I said softly. "I was never in trouble, but thank you for checking on me." She paused. "Can I come over soon?" I smiled. For the first time in days, it reached my eyes. Anytime. A week later, I found myself sitting in my study with the bracelet in my hands. That delicate gold chain with the emerald clasp.
It glimmered softly in the afternoon light. It no longer held sentimental value, not to me, but it symbolized something Melissa had tried and failed to destroy: my dignity, my integrity, my place in the family. I placed the bracelet in a small wooden box and locked it in my desk drawer, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of what lies can do, a reminder of what truth can restore, a reminder of how close a family can come to breaking when trust is taken for granted. One evening, Daniel returned, calmer this time, more centered. "We're separating," he said, "at least for now." I nodded. "I'm sorry it came to that." "I'm not," he said after a moment. "It hurts, but it feels like breathing again." He sat beside me, looking around the living room. "Dad," he said quietly, "I need to say something. Not as your son, but as a man who is finally seeing things clearly." I turned to him. "You didn't deserve any of this, and I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner. You raised me better than that." I rested a hand on his. "You see it now. That's enough." That night, after he left, I sat alone in my armchair, watching the moonlight spill across the floor. The house was quiet, peaceful, safe. And for the first time since the accusation, I allowed myself to breathe deeply, to release the injustice, the humiliation, the doubt others had cast upon me. Not because Melissa deserved forgiveness, but because I deserved peace. People often underestimate the quiet ones. They mistake silence for weakness, stillness for submission. But they forget that quiet men carry memories like lanterns. We see everything. We notice what others miss. And we do not strike until the truth is ready to speak for itself. Melissa forgot the camera. She forgot her daughter's eyes. Most of all, she forgot who I am. A grandfather, a father, a man who built his life on truth. And nothing, not lies, not rumors, not betrayal, can steal that from me. The storm passed, the truth remained, and the family slowly began to heal. In the end, justice wasn't loud. It was quiet, precise, and absolutely undeniable.